Thanks for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear today, feel free to tell everyone you know about it. You can also like it, share it, review it, and follow along. That way you don't miss another one. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for regular updates on future episodes. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Check out their state-of-the-art dealership next to BJ's and Big Y on Memorial Drive, or stop by MetroJeep.com and drive home in your new Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast. Resistance is useless.
In 2017, singer, songwriter, and record producer Chris Stamey published a memoir entitled A Spy in the House of Loud, New York Songs and Stories. It's a book that chronicles a career that touches on so many different phases of his life in independent music that it almost makes your head spin. From his early interest in music and recording in his home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to his journey to New York and beyond, Chris recounts the building blocks of an incredible resume. The sort of resume that makes Chris Stamey a legend in certain music circles, having been involved with so many important and highly respected recordings. From his time spent with the legendary Alex Chilton of the Box Tops and Big Star, to forming the dB's, whose first two albums are still considered essential classics even after 45 years since their release. He's worked with Richard Lloyd from television. He's had a lifelong friendship with former R.E.M. producer and leader of the band Let's Active, Mitch Easter. He's produced records for Ryan Adams and his band Whiskey Town, Pylon. He released the one and only solo album by the late Chris Bell of Big Star and his own record label. He's played with the Big Star Quintet, along with former Big Star drummer Jody Stevens and Mike Mills from R.E.M. He's contributed his talents to Yo La Tengo, the Golden Palominos, and the supergroup The Salt Collective, with whom he's also served as producer for their most recent releases, with another album coming out later this year called The Brief History of Blindness. Now, I could go on, but that's just a small slice of the man's resume. In fact, I haven't even mentioned his 3 collaborations with his former dB's bandmate Peter Holstapple, nor have I mentioned his 11 solo albums either. That includes his latest solo album, the critically praised Anything Is Possible, which includes performances by the Lemon Twigs, Marshall Crenshaw, Probyn Gregory from the Brian Wilson Band, and many others. It is a gorgeous record with insanely rich harmonies and a deep respect for the 50s and 60s records that he grew up with, including a nod to the late Brian Wilson. Chris Stamey will be performing in the area this fall with a stop at the Iron Horse in Northampton, Massachusetts on October 28th. He'll also be in the Boston area at the Cafe at the Somerville Armory the following night. This is my conversation with the legendary Chris Stamey on Baxie's Musical Podcast. First of all, I just want to say how much I love the new record, Anything Is Possible. It's such a great, harmonically beautiful record in a very ironic way. I mean, there's a real Brian Wilson essence to it, and not just the cover of Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder from Pet Sounds. I mean, you've got Probyn Gregory is on it, and even got like a Hal Blaine-like drum phrasing on the opening track, I'd Be Lost Without You. Tell me about it and about your thoughts about Brian Wilson.
Well, I came to Brian's writing a little bit later. I in high school, it was all about the blues, the English blues, and that was your ticket for coolness. But my friend Peter Holstapple was a Beach Boys fan, even if he wasn't shouting it to the rooftops, and he indoctrinated me a little bit into that. I will say that I find that I've come to it through a filter that maybe Brian shared, in that the Great American Songbook. Brian loved Gershwin, and also he was very fond of a choral group called the Four Freshmen.
Right.
And one thing about the Four Freshmen is there were 4 of them, so they tended to have 4-note chords, a little bit richer chords. A lot of times when you're playing guitar, or when you begin to play guitar, there are only 3 notes in the chords spread out over 6 strings. But I'm more and more drawn toward, chords with more notes in them, and the way that you can then, all of a sudden the playing field has more places to go. You can pivot to chords would have seemed glaring if you're in a smaller cowboy chord format. So it is funny that I mean the Brian Wilson influence seems strong on this record. I didn't think of it that way. I asked the Lemon Twigs to sing harmonies on that first song, and when they did and did these really glowing versions of an arrangement I'd given them, it really seemed to want to go in that way. The cover we did of Brian's song, Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder. Now, that was a song I'd always loved, and I'd sung it off and on for years. And that wasn't even intended for the album, to be frank. We were pretty much finished with the record, but it was before Brian died. And we were just, my co-producer, Wes Lachow, and I were talking about it, and we said, well, let's just record a version of that song. Maybe it'll get used on a soundtrack or something. And it turned out well, and we added it to the record.
You also got some help from Darian Sahanaja on that too, didn't he? Like provide
Oh, I
some.
did. Yeah. I mean, I know those guys because they're involved with this great group of folks that goes under a kind of loose banner of Wild Honey in Los Angeles, and they do these big benefit concerts. And a lot of them read music, and they try to do things very accurately and with great heart and soul. And I'd known Darian from that, so I knew I could. I told him we were going to record it and asked him if he had the original string scores, and he did. And he also had the original scores for this background vocal part that Brian Wilson had written and recorded and then scrapped from the original. So the original doesn't have it, but it has shown up on YouTube. It's a beautiful little 20-second thing. So I again corralled the Lemon Twigs to sing that because they're brothers, and the Beach Boys were brothers and cousins, and this is kind of a sound you get.
When I read that you had included the Daddario brothers from the Lemon Twigs, it made just like such perfect sense with this record, and also with the music that you typically put out. It's like it was like a seamless combination between you and them. Tell me about the Lemon Twigs, because I think a lot of people may not know of the Lemon Twigs, and when they discover them, they go, "Wow, what is that all about?" They're really remarkable couple of guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people who said, "Wow, what is that all about?" Bands, there's a certain argument to be made that bands are a thing you do as like a teenage gang or up through your 20s, and then after a point, what we call bands often becomes one guy and the musicians who support him, and not the gang anymore. And in a similar way, at my advanced age, I didn't think I was going to have a favorite band anymore. And lo and behold, I mean, the Lemon Twigs just blow my socks off. I think they're one of the best live bands anywhere around. And the way the brothers make those records is just inspiring in this computer controlled recording environment. I mean, they make them all analog, and they really sing and they really play that well. So, I mean, I guess we fell into an orbit when they joined up with one of the Big Star Third concerts I was doing with Jody Stevens. And then I opened a bunch of shows for them and got to know them a little bit. And I mean, at first when I met him, I hadn't heard him play, and they were asking me questions about these old records of mine, and I kind of put them off. I said, "You don't want to hear about the Sneakers record, or you're not interested in that old stuff, are you?" And it was shocking. They knew what the notes were. They were asking me about, okay, that flat nine chord and this obscure Sneakers song, but yeah, I could go on and on. But those guys are great, and it was quite an honor and a privilege to have them contribute some to this record.
You had a lot of other people involved in this record too. Marshall Crenshaw is involved in it. Don Dixon, who you've known for a long time. Robert Sledge from Ben Folds. I mean, there's a lot of other people involved, and Mitch Easter too. I want to talk more about him in a little bit. Who else was helping you out on this record?
Well, the core band really was Jason Foreman on acoustic bass, Dan Davis on drums, and Charles Cleaver on keyboards. And I played all the guitars, and I did play the electric bass on whenever there's an electric bass. And I went in with those guys after we rehearsed off and on for a couple of months and recorded a lot of material, and thinking that was going to be the album. And then when I got sidetracked into doing the shows with the Lemon Twigs and with Mitch Easter, the record took a little bit of a turn toward more of an integration of electric guitars and rock and drums. And so it changed a little bit, but that initial session we did is still the core of the record. So Jason Foreman, Dan Davis, and Charles Cleaver.
You know, I actually just finished reading your book, Spy in the House of Loud.
Oh,
Yeah, I just finished reading it, and you go into a great deal of detail about a lot of different things. One of the things that really kind of stands out to me, and we'll get to a couple of them, is your friendship with Mitch Easter. This is a guy that you've known for, it seems like virtually your entire life, and you've seemed to have kind of followed similar pathways in music, not just making your own music, making music together, but also as producers.
I don't know if you can say my whole life. I didn't meet him till I was 6.
That's close.
Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant, and there's always a twinkle in his eye. And we went through model rockets and riding motorcycles and tinkering with tape recorders before he started playing guitar, and I followed suit a little bit later when it looked like it was really just kind of too much fun to pass up on. So we didn't start doing stuff together. As musicians, we started doing stuff together as kids. But we have kept up, and I mean, like today, it's been almost 45 minutes since I've talked to him. So we do strangely communicate.
Why such a long gap, Chris?
Well, I had to eat a sandwich, take a shower,
Yeah.
No, I think it's easy to speak we can talk to each other in a clear fashion because we grew up together and shared the same roots. So it's also, he's awesomely talented and a really good intuitive producer who makes it seem easy. I think we produce things differently. I think he's sometimes more up to walking into a session and jumping in cold, and I tend to try to arrange more pre-production sometimes. But I don't know if that's always the case. And then we just did this record that I did produce, but we did it at his studio, and he did so much on it. It's called the Salt Collective. That's what we were talking about today. It's kind of a super group record with Andy Partridge and Amy Mann and Matthew Cause from Not a Surf, and this guitarist from France named Stefan Schuck. And I was the de facto producer on it. I mean, the titled producer on it, but it was Mitch and I were just sitting in the same room as we were cutting tracks, and I could look over at him and kind of gauge if yay or nay on things. And it was really nice to be doing that again with him.
It's the Song Collective stuff is really terrific. And then when I heard that Andy Partridge is involved and that you had been writing music with him, I'm a sucker for XTC and have been for years. And I think he's just such a remarkably generational type of songwriter. How did you get to be involved with him, and how did you get involved in this? And tell me about the experience of writing with a guy like that.
Well, there are many people on the record. So Andy contributed to 2 songs of the 11 on the Salt Collective record, but I met him when I was producing a guy named Peter Blegvad in England. He was a great songwriter, and I was producing all but one song. Andy was going to do one song, and Andy came in, and I'd been kind of, like gentle guiding hand. Gee, guys, maybe we should do this. And Andy was like, a general walked into the room. It was like, all right, men. And I was very impressed when he walked over to the drummer, and Andy grabbed his hi-hat and moved it away and said, "You're not going to be needing this." And it really kind of showed me, if you're thinking clearly about an arrangement, you can hone it down at the very beginning and get there faster. So, but it was just a super cool guy, and he helped me out on a record of mine. I think it was Lovesick Blues. And then on this record, it ended up with him contributing mostly lyrics, and I was doing mostly music. But then would get on. A lot of this record was played together by a band at the same time in the studio, but Andy couldn't come over for that, and so he'd send me stuff. I would work on it. We'd go get on Zoom and it'd say, "Oh yeah, 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 no, 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 change. Let's change that." So it was a modern collaboration.
One of the things that I know is true of Andy is he doesn't necessarily collaborate with someone he doesn't have a great deal of respect for. So the fact that he was writing with you and collaborating with you, it says a lot about Chris Stamey, as would be for anybody else. So I mean, that's a hell of a compliment.
Yeah, yeah. I guess you're so. I mean, now that you think about it, I'm becoming completely intimidated. But yeah, but I mean, I will say that I have never found it hard to have a rapport with musicians. I really get that kind of those brain waves, and but it does really help with somebody like Andy Partridge who really does know the chords and knows music theory and can talk very quickly and intelligently and concisely about things. But he wasn't the biggest part of the Salt Collective record. I mean, it was more the band. Matthew Cause was huge, is huge in it. Lynn Blakey, but maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, they are great records. The first album and the EP that just came out are really, really good. I mean, it's, to have all this come out of this at the same time. I mean, it must be. I mean, how do you even have time for much else at this point?
Well, I mean, it used to be you would make two records a year. Things are moving. When Giants walked the earth in the 60s, two records a year. Sometimes you needed to do three a year. So I don't think of things as moving that fast, actually. I mean, it's frustrating. I'd like to do more. Um, I mean, I have time. I don't know. My wife and I garden, but I have been touring some,
Yeah.
and I also have been playing with this group we call the Big Star Quintet, which evolved out of these big concerts we were doing of the Big Star's third record. But we've kind of boiled it down to Jody Stevens and myself and Pat Sansone and John Auer and usually Mike Mills, although sometimes John Sturrott plays bass. And that's really fun. So I've just done some of those shows in July. I'm doing more in September.
One of the things in the book that is absolutely fascinating when you talk about Big Star is you working with Alex Chilton and your relationship with him. This is before the dB's. This is very early on in your career. And you talk about how much you learned from a guy like Alex. Tell me about that experience with him. I mean, it sounds like it was really like you just absorbed so much from a guy like that.
I think he liked mentoring kind of, and for some reason I fell under his wing. Well, he was living with me for a bit. He didn't have a place to live. But then that continued throughout that year, and the little record label we were on had a deal with a recording studio, and we could go up and record. And because it was just the two of us, he would play a lot of things, or he would coax me to play a lot of things. And he would say, "Oh no, sing like Peter Lorre," or he would say, "Oh, this is what Carl Wilson would have done." Because back to the Beach Boys thing, he had the box office had opened, 150 shows for Brian Wilson, and he knew Dennis and Carl well and knew all those guys. And I was at a place where I knew a little bit about recording and was really eager to learn. And I think he, enjoyed teaching me stuff.
Yeah.
And it was at a time when he was doing kind of movie. He was about to produce The Cramps, and he was doing kind of a harder edged and almost like performance pieces sometimes. But last night, in back to the present time, we were watching the Zombies documentary, and it made me go on and play for the other people in the room the song "I Don't Believe in Miracles" by Colin Blunstone, which is
Mm.
not ironic or sardonic at all. It's a very sincere song that Alex would sing most shows, and it also goes up to the highest vocal note you can imagine. I can't believe he was hitting that every night, but he completely always could pull out that amazing voice. I think I veered a little bit from your
No, absolutely, absolutely not. Because yeah, I'm a big fan of Big Star, like a lot of other people have. I find that the story behind Big Star is sad and it's maddening. It's a lot of different things. I mean, there's a band that should have been a household name all across the country, but due to a lot of different reasons, largely out of their own control, it didn't happen. And it seemed to have a deep effect on him and certainly on Chris Bell. Did he ever discuss any of that with you, or did he kind of remain private about what happened to Big Star?
Um, I don't even know if his perspective was the same as what you're describing because, you 99% of all bands and all records fail to find a popular audience. I mean, the Big Star records seemed strikingly good, and songs like 13 seems to have something in their DNA that gets almost everybody right away. But a lot has been made about the loss of distribution and not many gigs and all that stuff. But there are a lot of stories out there. I don't think he was thinking of it as a failure. I never really heard that exactly. And he had a lot of confidence in himself. And I mean, one of the first songs that I worked on him with was a song called "Shaking the World" from 34th and Lex. Which basically, said something like that. There's a man on Madison Avenue who says that we're through, but I know we're shaking the world. And so, he wasn't really, I mean, when I was around him, he wasn't dragged down by that. It was more about music, really.
You were also not to make this not to make this all about Big Star, but you were also involved in the release of Chris Bell's solo album, "Eye on the Cosmos," which I think is one of those unappreciated gems that unfortunately not enough people know about. It's a remarkable album from a tremendous talent. Tell me a little bit about that. I know that Alex was actually pretty instrumental in getting you involved in producing, not producing it, but at least releasing it.
Yes, Alex came over, he came back to visit in I don't know, I think 78 in New York, and he told me you should put this song out. Chris has this great song, and you should put it out. I mean, my label was really just me. I mean, it was like an indie record label is these days, but at the time it was kind of strange. And we, I mean, I thought it was great, and I was just a conduit. I mean, I asked him to speed it up a little bit. I did do that, and he did. Not that it isn't still really slow, but at that era, it was very normal to go into mastering and maybe it's kind of the Spinal Tap goes to 11 thing. You would maybe nudge a record a little bit faster because it gets a little bit brighter when you're mastering it. And he wanted to give me this one B-side, and I said, no, no, I like this "You and Your Sister" song, which is the flip, and it's also really great. But I've said before, I always felt like the world changed a little bit when that record came out. It's great, and he was buried with it. I mean, it made a difference to him.
In 1978, you formed the dB's with Will Rigby and Gene Holder, and Peter Holsapple eventually joins. Those first two records are considered to be classics. Stands for Decibels and Repercussion. They're both great records. When I'm reading the book, I was kind of surprised to kind of get your take on at least that first record, and that you weren't fully satisfied with maybe your part of the record or of the record itself. It's interesting how some of that kind of lends to this. You're about to really start developing as a songwriter at that point. And I don't know if it was because you felt you needed more time or it wasn't coming across. What were your thoughts about that record, now as opposed to when it came out back in the in the early 80s?
My take on it now, I mean, what do I know, really? But um, when I look at it just in terms of songwriting, I think I was hitting a pretty good groove. I think there are good songs on the Sneakers record, and I like the single I did with Alex a lot, Summer Sun and Where the Fun Is. I actually think I was wearing too many hats at the time the DB's things were going on because I was, you'd have to get them to confirm, but I feel like I was, knowing what I do now, I was essentially producing those records, or I was any case, I was the bossy guy. And, but I mean, literally, I was flying around and, cutting the tape and mixing and all doing all this stuff and finding other engineers. And So I was heavily involved, and I really think that my songs suffered on both those records. I was really glad that Peter could pick up the slack a little bit. I mean, so I don't see when people look at the songwriting credits and they kind of know who wrote what, I am not sure they would disagree. I feel like by the time I came around and got to my first record on A&M, I was back in the saddle as far as songwriting. But in New York at that time, it was nuts, and in the CBGB era. And I'd fallen into a thing of writing down lyrics on napkins at the bar, whereas Peter was still writing them down on his desk with a proper pen and a little more careful than I was. So I guess that's my take.
Yeah.
I don't mean to argue with anybody who thinks that they're the greatest thing since Oreos, but it isn't really the way I feel.
Well, when you compare them to Oreos, I mean that's a hard.
Yeah,
I mean, what are you going to do with that?
Oreos are layers. Yeah, I know.
But in the book you talked about when you left the dB's, the reasoning behind it. I thought it was really interesting. You have two strong songwriters in this band, and everything is kind of like divided equally. Like he gets 5 songs, you get 5 songs, or whatever it may be. Developing as a songwriter that way, when some of the maybe the stronger songs you've written may not be appropriate for this record or whatever it may be, it felt like in some ways that you were constrained by that situation, and that what you really needed was to get away and to start stretching out. The other thing that I thought was really interesting and how you put this is that in 1982 records were kind of relegated to like a 38 42 minute format. Had this been beyond 1982 and CDs had been out there, maybe you would have stayed around and given yourself the opportunity to actually record and release your record. I thought it was a really interesting way of putting it, and it never really occurred to me that would be a consideration.
Yeah, I mean, let's speak frankly here. Everybody likes vinyl, but it's a villain. I mean, you hit 18, 20 minutes just on a side and you're out of gas. I mean, people put more on it, but it just sounds terrible. Um, yeah, I if CDs had been around, that might have been a different story there. But again, there's another argument that says that cooperative one for all and all for one bands are kind of something you do in your late teens and early 20s,
Mm.
it's doesn't mean it's a forever story. And the DB's got very strong without me. I mean, Peter stepped up and wrote all the songs pretty much, and there are a lot of great ones.
Your career as a producer is really interesting too, and not just from the musical standpoint, but I find it interesting that some of the artists that you talk about in your book, and some that I've listened to, because I mean the records I own, it's really interesting how, I mean, I think of like in particular like Whiskey Town with Ryan Adams, and then also Chomp, the second album from Pylon. I love both those records, and for different reasons, but these are two very, very different artists, which probably require different things from a producer. When it comes to producing, do you find you have like one way of doing things, or do you find a certain flexibility based on who you're working with?
Well, I think people have come to me who already feel there'd be a rapport there. Although, that is an odd, I mean, I think you mentioned those two records. I mean, I also, I did these records by this band La Tigra, with Kathleen Hanna, and that was some of my very favorite records, and that was an entirely different skill set. I mean, there were a lot of samples on those records, and also a lot of political content and um, lo-fi aesthetic. So, I mean, I have done a lot of different things. Or Alejandro Escovedo, I think I always go in and I think I'm biased on behalf of the song. Sometimes not necessarily by an advocate for even the artist as much as the song. And I'll try to make sure the key is right, the tempo is right, the structure is right, that there's not any kind of fat in there that should be cut, or maybe there you need to add some fat. And that's where I approach it. And people, like Jimmy Miller with the Stones is famous for grabbing the maracas, and you get, Sympathy for the Devil, and it's this performance in the studio. I mean, anybody who makes records loves it when lightning strikes and you have a great performance in the studio. It's so much easier, but I'm more a song guy. I think and the job of a producer is really to do what's necessary and not more. And we all try to do that, but when you need to do what's necessary, you have maybe different toolboxes to do it in.
Do you find it easier or more difficult or more challenging to produce yourself as opposed to somebody else who may come in with their own ideas? Or I mean, or does it make any difference to you?
I find it very difficult to produce myself. I just do. I don't know why I keep doing it. A couple of times labels have said, well, we can't afford the people who are better than you, and you're pretty good. And then sometimes I'm making the records over a year or so while I'm doing other things, and I don't have a producer who could pop in and out. But I'm thinking about that one. I find it pretty hard. I think I'd rather, cut my own hair or put my own makeup on. That's a joke. Than produce myself. But then again, like I like this new record a lot, and I think I did a good job on it. It is true that at the end of the record, I did need help, and I got my friend Wes Show to help, and he does have a co-production credit on it because of that.
Now, do you ever get like a Mitch Easter, Don Dixon discount for producing?
Those guys would be glad to help me, and Don and Mitch have helped me a lot. But Don's up in Ohio, and Mitch is really busy, and maybe I'm shy about asking him. Maybe they'll hear this and knock on my door.
Well, that would
Don actually produced my friend Peter Holzapfel and did a great job. Peter has a new record out that Don did, and that was a meeting of minds, I think.
Yeah. I've also remembered Don Dixon and his solo records and how good they were, and that those he hasn't done enough of his own music. I think he's also terrific.
And of course, he's producing himself.
You're going on tour. In fact, you'll be in our area in Massachusetts, in Northampton, Massachusetts, on the 28th of October at the Iron Horse, and in Somerville in outside Boston on the 29th. You still enjoy playing live? Do you enjoy the touring part of it, or is it is it a little bit more work now?
Oh, it's much better now. Way better. I'm really having fun with it. I mean, when I started playing, you didn't have monitors. I often think that bands like Cream or the Beatles would still have been touring if they had monitors. You were when I started playing, you were walking in, and it was whatever PA would be used for the wrestling matches. But I mean, later in the late 70s and 80s, the things were already a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, another advantage to touring now is the dreaded internet, emails, cell phones. It used to be, you'd be driving down the highway for 35 miles before you finally found a payphone, only to call and find your gig's been canceled that night.
Yeah, that is a benefit. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it never gets really easy, but it's easier in many ways. And I don't know, I had a great time last month. I travel with written arrangements and find players that, for the most part, read music, and it all sounds different, but it also cuts down. I mean, every time is a little different. It's not that my charts are so detailed that people can't put their own thing into it, but when you're traveling in that way, it cuts down on a lot of rehearsal.
Well, Chris, like I said, the album is fantastic. Anything is possible. The Salt Collective stuff is out. That is fantastic as well.
But the Salt Collective thing, the big album, the one we've really been sweating, is coming out in October, and that's the one that Andy's on and that I was talking about. I think there's a new EP that came out a couple of months ago.
Yes,
and it's more like the things that happened in the session while we were making other plans. It really fun tracks, and I really like all those things that came out on the EP. But I think the weight will come down when the record comes out in October, and I do think it's super.
I can't wait to hear it. Chris, it's great to talk to you. I appreciate you being flexible today, and best of luck to you.
Same to you, and it's been a delight.
Appreciate it.
Talk to you again.
Thank you, Chris. The new album by Chris Stamey is called Anything Is Possible. He's also produced the new Soul Collective album, A Brief History of Blindness, which comes out later this year. Chris is also coming to the Iron Horse in Northampton on October 28th. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. You can email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks to Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram for their support, but most of all, thanks to you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.